Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cosmic Conversations with your two astrologers, Katie from Temple of Cosmic Astrology, myself, and the beautiful Tiarnie. Welcome, love. How are you going?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling this Pluto retrograde though already.
Mm-hmm,
So I feel like today going deep into the retrogrades is definitely what I'm feeling with this conversation, wherever it goes. But I saw, you wrote a really beautiful piece about it, actually. And I would love to hear for you to share with everyone some of your thoughts about this retrograde season that's begun, because we are entering into this 5-month period of retrogrades. So, yeah, what are you feeling with it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always see Pluto, because there is that fear or that darkness, and it's true. Like, it's great, especially if you're a Plutonian.
Yeah.
But the thing that I always say, especially when I'm reading charts for, like people with Pluto in the 12th, Katie, like you do a great job at interpreting, the sort of people they attract. But my biggest thing is there can be this real fear, like it's a house, there's an addict, and you just never go into it. Like that's Pluto in the 12th house. And that's Pluto in general. There can be this real fear around wanting to strip back, peel back who you really are. And I always say that like Pluto doesn't give a fuck what your opinion is, and he will destroy everything that's not the truth, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I always say to people, if you just turn the light on in that room, yeah, there's going to be some shit maybe you don't want to look at, but you can see everything. And I think it's because I have Pluto in the first. So for me, it's exposed. I don't hide the Plutonian stuff. Like I'm not scared of it by any means.
Yeah.
But I think that I sort of really described this Pluto retrograde as being the light. Like it is the light because we now become more introspective. Healing can happen. It's shining light on those parts of us where it's time to face the truth, face ourselves, uncover, rediscover. And this retrograde particularly with Jupiter right there, like it feels bigger than like a typical Pluto retrograde. Like last year we didn't have this feeling. It was Jupiter really is expanding this energy, and I think making us like, oh, I don't know, I just feel like this big open into the purge. Like it's like I'm open, and then I talked about skipping, like I'm skipping to the underworld. Like I don't know, I find that there's this sort of like fun part, but maybe I'm a sadist, like because I've got Pluto in the first and a stellium in the 8th. Like maybe that's a part of this.
For you, maybe it's a really exciting process. Maybe for other people it's a little bit more like, fucking help me. Like it's not an easy process to go through. But I think that particularly this year, what is going to make this Pluto retrograde more prominent is the fact that it's going to be cycling back over this period that we've had since January. Or I mean, we could even take it back a little bit before, and maybe like that November 2019 period of that 21 to 24 degree area of Capricorn. So it's going to be, everything that has kind of been decimated in a sense over these past few months. You now have a chance to kind of pick up those pieces if you are willing to do that deep inner reflective work that is required of a Pluto retrograde transit. The thing with Pluto retrograde as well is that with any of the transpersonal retrogrades is they spend half the year in retrograde. So I think that this is maybe where people struggle to kind of really understand how the outer planets affect them via retrograde, because it's very different to a Mercury retrograde, for example, in that it's so much more subtle. It's a 5-month process every year of really, I see it as a very intricate energy, but like you said, with Jupiter coming through this year, it's kind of like a bit of a wrecking ball. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out collectively, I think, as it's going to be re-triggering some of these huge points that we've already just experienced in such a compact period of time. Like if we look at the last 4 months, who would have thought things would be where they're at now? And, I guess we can kind of say that for anything really, but this year has just been, you know, next level. And, you know, it's kind of coming, you know, with Venus going retrograde as well in just, when is that? Is that
The 13th here.
13th of May?
May.
What? Oh, okay. I thought it was June. Just, you know,
No.
I wish.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's kind of it too, you know, with Venus retrograde, that's only every 18 months. So we're really stepping into another year of what 2018 was, I think, with Venus and Mars retrograde. And it brings such a slowing down of things in ways that I think people aren't always really kind of prepared for. And this is where we come unstuck, because we're constantly trying to push for change when that change truly has to be from within, as cliched as that sounds. But 2020 is absolutely a year for inner reflection, I feel.
To think that all planets are retrograde this year, yeah, it absolutely is.
Yep.
It's the cosmic push that people need. We're being isolated, which is a time of inner reflection, and if you're hurrying off to busy yourself back to your normal life, you just haven't got it. Like, you haven't got the message or the bigger picture of what 2020 and this new era and this new paradigm that we are in, you know, like we talked about Aquarian age last week, and it's not just so much about that, it's that we're literally like ending a cycle and moving into a new one as well. So we've been forced to go home, which is, you know, Cancer North Node, and, you know, we're moving away from that Capricorn South Node, even though we've been forced to by the sort of 1 and 0 degrees of this happening. But then every planet goes retrograde, which doesn't happen every year. So it's showing us that, and yeah, when planets are retrograde, especially the outer planets, like, that's normal. And I was saying today on something that I did, to see a chart with no retrogrades, that's the rare gem. Like, that is the rare gem. It's a very rare to see a chart with no retrogrades. It's just, you know, like, I've got all 5, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all retrograde in my chart. And to be honest, I love when something goes into retrograde, especially outer planets. And we are just about to move into big retrograde season, because Saturn moves, Saturn retrogrades on the 11th, and we've got Venus on the 13th, and then we've got Jupiter on the something of, I've got it written down somewhere
you've got
else.
dates, because like I'm just not feeling my head with dates today. I'm just like, when is everything happening?
Yeah, it's only because I did my vlog with all the dates, but I can't remember Jupiter. But Jupiter's also here as well. So we've just had Pluto, then it's Saturn, then it's Venus, then it's Jupiter. So that's just in a matter of 4 weeks, you know, like, we've got this big chunk of energy deciding to, okay, and it is, retrospective is the best word for a retrograde, and it's nothing to be feared, you know, it's nothing to fear, and something I said about 2020 in general, nothing to fear and everything to watch. I mean, retrogrades, the shadow is giving you so many clues, and if you're aware of the shadow, you're being told what's going to happen in the retrograde. Like, you pay attention to the clues that come up in that shadow period. And you know, and just for people who don't understand that, that's the degree that the planet will move into, and then hits the retrograde, and then go back over, and then again when it moves direct, go back over again. So it's essentially going over the same degree 3 times. And the first time is be aware. The second time is, you know, well, I mean, I'm simplifying this. You can certainly elaborate on how you see the three phases.
To this today, I think, though. So keep it simple.
Yeah, and it is, and that's and that's the thing. I think that there can be such simplicity in astrology, and just stripping back all the words, stripping back everything, and just bringing it right back to home roots, which is, you know, what we're both very good at, because we're both self-taught astrologers. But yeah, you know, that first period is like, be aware, pay attention. You know, one of my favorite astrologers, Michael Lennox, I love when he describes Mercury retrograde, because he's like, how do I know what's going to happen in the retrograde? I sit in my house and watch. And I'm like, yes, because and that's how I feel like I live my life. I'm just sitting down, paying attention. I don't have to be out there. I just know what's going to happen by, oh, that was triggered. Oh, this is triggered. And if you've been, you know, very awake, Venus has been in her shadow for a couple of weeks, and you want, I can't remember, is it a couple of weeks? So the 10th, I think, of April.
It was right around the time that Saturn went into Aquarius. It was all within about a week period of that.
Okay. Yeah. So, how's your relationships been going in April? I mean, there's a clue to how they're going to go in the retrograde period. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I love retrograde stuff too. And I think it is because 50% of my chart is retrograde. Obviously the sun and the moon will never retrograde. So we're just looking at the other 7 planets and when they retrograde in your own natal chart, like Katie said, natally retrograde planets are really interesting. I think the 5 transpersonals, like that's very normal. But I think having inner planets retrograde, I mean, if you've got a Mars or a Venus retrograde, that's actually rare. Like that doesn't happen all the time. So you want to pay attention to that natally. And then if Mercury's retrograde, I mean, again, that's more common, but a Venus Mars retrograde in your own chart is something to pay attention to, definitely.
Definitely, absolutely. Because, and I think I liked sort of what you said about paying attention to the clues in the lead up. Like that's how a shadow works in retrogrades. It's like the things that happen in that period leading up to that stopping of that planetary energy is going to show you what is then going to be kind of reflected upon in the retrograde cycle. So for example, with Venus, she spends 40 days in retrograde. So the mythology of Venus around that, if you want to investigate that further, is like by looking into the mythology of Ishtar, because that it represents the cycle where she kind of descended down into the underworld for this 40 days and 40 nights. It's actually where Christianity took that with Jesus in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. It's all the same thing, and it's talking about it's not about an actual person per se going out and doing that, as opposed to like a reflective kind of period that we each learn to move through. That's kind of how these cycles work. And so during this 40 days when Venus is retrograde, we actually don't see her. We know Venus has been like the morning star or the evening star, and that's how her cycle moves. When she's a morning star, she will spend 18 months in that cycle. She has a retrograde. We don't see her in the sky during that 40 days and 40 nights. And then when she returns, she switches back to the evening star. And it does this kind of dance every 18 months. So, we're moving into this period now of this where we're not going to see Venus. Like you're not going to see everything relating to relationships, values, finance, anything that you feel like a heart connection to is going to feel like it's on pause. Now that doesn't mean that you're not going to have relationships or that everything's going to be negative or bad, but it's like things are going to come into your sphere of your experience to ask you to reflect on how you are actually moving through that connection yourself or that partnership. And that will be relevant to wherever the transit is happening. So it's Gemini. So you need to look for where Gemini is in your natal chart. For me, it's 4th house. So it's going to be all around themes of where I'm living, how I feel in my own home, how I feel in the home that is my body. These are how I need to understand myself so that I can better connect with people externally by having a firmer foundation within. For you, like Tiarnie, where's Gemini?
9th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Venus retro in your 9th.
Yes. Yep.
How do you
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, I personally am excited about this Venus retrograde. 18 months ago, we had Venus in Scorpio retrograding, which you remember because that was deep and holy. And this one, Venus hasn't retrograded in Gemini since 2012. And, if we can remember back to 2012, that's great. I sort of am trying to, but it's just like, okay, well, I remember like some things, but, if it wasn't something prominent, like I did have a client, oh, that's when I got divorced and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, boom, you're going to remember that shit, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's some sort of reprieve with Venus in Gemini. Venus doesn't not like being in her. I don't think it's one of her, it's certainly not one of her detriment sort of signs or anything like that,
I feel like Venus
it is, yeah. Because she wants to be mentally stimulated, and there's nothing wrong with, because Gemini rules the mind. So, she wants to be mentally stimulated. It wants to, look at your relationships. Are you bored? Where can you spice things up a bit? And I've really sort of given the tips and advice to all of my sort of crew around just lightening the fuck up. you know, like this is a big thing, like have a bit of fun. Like Gemini is so, you know, I'm not saying all Geminis are surface, but there is this element of surface when it comes to Gemini, playful, less serious, lively, again, you know, have a laugh, you know, like I love Carl Barron and straight away, of course he's a Gemini, like it just makes sense, right? um um let's not go there, but Carol Baskin, of course she's a Gemini. Sorry, I had to do it.
Thank you for going there. Our earlier chat before we started recording, like, of course that was going to come up.
Oh, it was
We
so
did a
good.
King episode.
It was so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just think that there's actually like a bit of a reprieve here. Like May feels light, but this Venus, you know, for me in the ninth house, I just feel excited about exploring more and being more internal, like diving more into some books and some study and things like that. That's how I feel like it's going to play out for me.
Yeah.
But I just think that, you know, Venus is such a, but Venus for me also is my chart ruler. So I've got a Libra ascendant, plus I have a stellium in Libra and a stellium in Taurus. So so my sun's also Taurus and Venus is in Taurus for me. So Venus is very, very,
yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's weird, and I say this to people. I know everyone's charts are unique, but I've never seen such a heavy Venusian chart. I've seen a stellium in Taurus, but their chart ruler hasn't been Venus as well. So it is a very lot of stuff. Maybe you have, but I just haven't. I haven't seen so, unless there's someone born around my time. Of course, all of those people will have the same shit, right? But I don't meet those people very much, right? But in general, right? And so Venus retrograde is something, if you do have a Libran ascendant or a Taurus sun or a Taurus ascendant or a Libran sun, like you want to pay attention to that. That's either a chart ruler or your sun's ruler. And you want to really, for me, you know, last Venus retrograde, 18 months ago, in 24 hours, I got a speeding ticket, which means I had to pay money. So there was the money. My husband lost his wedding ring. Like that's our wedding ring. You know, it was a 10-year wedding anniversary. So he was really devastated by that. And as I was as well. And then the third thing that happened was my computer just absolutely shit itself and I needed to work. So I had to go and spend $800 on a computer. It was my first big business spend. And I had to do all the research because you're not, you're not really supposed to buy big things in a Venus retrograde because we've got to look at money. So you want to watch where you're, you know, being frivolous with your money, because of course we still have to spend money. I'm not saying that don't go and not spend money, or again, like Katie said, you're not having relationships. It's like, if you sat around because Mercury is retrograde, you'd be sitting around for most of the year, like shadow, retrograde, shadow, like hello, like it's a long time. So you don't sit around and do nothing. You have to activate that and know where it's happening in your chart. So this is sort of what we talked about last week as well. If you don't know where this stuff's happening in your chart, you're jumping on a bandwagon without knowing anything. And the thing is that there's nothing, retrogrades are great. Like for me, I love them. And I think that if you know where they're happening in your chart, you've got that deep insight and deep awareness to understand what's going to be coming up for you. Like it's pure gold. It's pure gold. You want to understand the retrogrades and where they're happening in your own chart, not just tack on to, oh, it's Venus retrograde. But what does that mean for you? Like a lot of people talk about this shit. It's going to be everywhere, but where is it happening in your own chart? You know, like that is the most important bit of information that you can get. You want clues from the universe, go to your chart, and then all of a sudden things will be revealed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, like today I saw something, you know, that was like about Pluto retrograde, and it was like a time of karma being dissolved like instantaneously, and it's like, what? Like I love these kind of Instagram posts that like kind of like you said, tack on to like surface level of what that retrograde could be, but like karma is something that's like constantly being, you know, activated and, you know, revealed and moved through, and it's not this cut and dried like in 5 months all of your problems are going to be solved. It's like okay, so it's like don't really like ride on the coattails of that kind of astrology, because it's not actually of substance. It's not giving you really anything to help you practically apply that to your life. Like, yes, Pluto does have a karmic element to it. So there may be things that come up through this process for you that reveal a bigger part of the story that you are finding yourself in. But that doesn't give like this pass of just like, oh well, in 5 months like everything's going to be perfect in my life and make sense. Like you have to move through that in alignment with the space in your chart. You know, for me it's 11th house, for me it's around communities and friendships and things like this, you know, but that's not going to be for everybody. So like learning the basics of your chart is so important, you know. And Tiarnie and I are both teachers. We're passionate about teaching astrology, you know, and as much, you know, we do readings with clients and this is what we love as well. But like, I know both of us are kind of like, we adore teaching people the basics, like getting a newbie to come in and sit in space with you and just start learning how these cycles work in alignment with your own chart. Like that is what is going to open these doorways of revelation for you personally. Like that's the gift of astrology. So yeah, I really feel like just kind of not taking everything you see like online about astrology at face value, because retrogrades are so much deeper than what a lot of the information out there is kind of talking about, because you need to, like we said, apply it personally. Like what is going on in your life in that shadow period up to that point, that is going to give you so much more information than reading about just Venus in Gemini in general, right? Like apply it to what you are experiencing. That's the beauty of it, you know. And it's interesting as well, Tiarnie, like I loved what you sort of said about how, you know, it's more rare to find a chart with no retrogrades. Like I had this conversation with a friend the other day too, who was like, oh, I just only realized now that I have this and this retrograde. And I was like, yeah, like of course you do. Like it's so common. Just find a chart that only has you know, I mean, I don't have a lot of retrogrades. I'm trying to think. Mercury, obviously, as you can tell, sometimes I'm confused when I speak. What else have I got? The only other retrograde that I have is Chiron. Also makes complete sense, guys. That's it for another topic. But yeah, so I was born actually, I think about a week after when I was born is when everything switched into the retrograde season. So for me, I don't have any transpersonal planets retrograde. Maybe that's
wow.
Yeah, and
I often it is earlier months that don't, depending. It does seem like the bigger sort of, there's the rare occasion, like I just read in October, so a Libran girl's chart, and she had nothing retrograde in October. And I was like, wow, that's rare, because usually in October we're either sort of finishing something. Sometimes Uranus is starting his retrograde like a little bit later and going to that January, February. So it's just really fascinating. But having no planets retrograde, you know, from doing some research on it and talking to I've only had a few clients with no planets retrograde and not even Chiron. So I've had another lady not like a week after that client who had only Chiron retrograde. So that was pretty cool too. Like, but there's just this energy of like a fast moving train, like just not being able to slow anything down. And I think that maybe that's why I like the sort of the slowness, because I've got I've got all of those transpersonal planets, Jupiter through Pluto retrograde, whereas you've got none. So, I mean, there's that real, whereas I've got no inner planets retrograde. And to be honest, I think I would prefer no inner planets retrograde, because inner planets retrograde.
Mercury retrograde natal, it's kind of like, but this is a good example, okay? So, you know, I find for me, my entire fucking life and how my mind works, I permanently live in a Mercury retrograde, guys. And it's in my 12th house. Fuck.
Yeah, she's a poet. She's amazing. That's why she's all these. She's a poet and she doesn't know it. Like, come on.
I love that. Thank you. A poet and she doesn't know it. It's beautiful. So yeah.
So graceful.
So graceful. But yeah, so for me, like, guys, you know, I don't know what the hell's going on half the time. You know, I try, but but so when it's actually,
I have to vouch, it's true.
Yes, very, very true.
I love it.
When it's actually Mercury retrograde and everyone else is running around like they've got their heads cut off, I'm just like, I'm in my element. I'm like, this is great. My life for me flows in Mercury retrograde. So if you have Mercury retrograde in your chart, you probably, like, you completely understand what I'm talking about. Like for us, that kind of chaotic, like, I don't know, miscommunication and just weird electronics and I don't know, just that's such a generic example, but you know, we kind of live our lives in this more chaotic mercurial space.
Mm.
But then for someone to have, like, how do you think, Tiarnie, like you would apply that for someone that, say, natally has Mars retrograde? Because this is another
Mm.
18-month cycle, roughly. You know, it's
Yeah.
quite common that Venus and Mars retrograde. It's not.
Well, so Mars is 2 years, right?
Okay, it's 2. Yeah.
So it was only 18 months ago where Mars and Venus got together in the same year. That hadn't happened for a long time because
That's
they were
what I thought.
alternate years.
Yeah. That's what it's usually alternate years, but we're just
They
in
are.
kind of crossover period where, like,
We are.
2018 and 2020 are simultaneous. And I think that
They
from
are.
the next one, it will split back, I think.
Next year, 2021, Venus retrogrades December. So
Uh,
yes, she
yeah.
will retrograde for the next 2 years, but December going into 2022. But you know, and that's what's been so prevalent, I think, is having the feminine and the masculine both retrograde at the same time, because everything else happens. Like, you don't even go there. They always retrograde.
Yep.
But when Mars and Venus add to the pop, that's why this year, as we spoke about earlier, is this very retrospective. This is a time of inner change, inward reflection, self-reflection, self-annihilation. And I just wanted to quickly touch on when you just talked about Pluto and how it's going back over all of these, you know, these last couple of degrees and going back over everything. And what I've felt is like the excavation and destruction of what's been happening, both individually and collectively. But we want to have a look at your own individual lives right now when we're looking at Pluto retrograde. But it's like going and sifting through all of that too. Like, I just feel like it's sort of like a dump, which is a horrible analogy, but that's how I've seen it. It's just like all of the garbage is there.
Yep.
Now, what are you actually going to fucking do with it? Like,
Exactly.
you don't want to live in it. You're not going to live in this dumpster. And this is a dumpster of your own emotions or your own, yes, old karmic ties. Like, yes, all of these things. There's potential for incredibly healing karmic things if you're coattailing onto something, but if you're actually going there and facing, okay, yeah, here's the destruction of what's just happened.
Yep.
Pluto's here now to go back over those last couple of degrees to come back forward again later in the year. And it's like, yeah, what are you cleaning up mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, you know, karmically? What are you clearing up? Like, this is a time of karmic cleansing.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, it's exactly like you described. Like, it's not the nicest analogy, but it fits,
I know.
you know. But like, what are you going to do? Like, think about, like, between January and now, like, everything that has been revealed to you that you haven't really either, like, I think we've all kind of surprisingly had the time to process it, but we still really haven't wanted to, you know, and that's okay. But this next 5-month period, longer really, the next 6 months, I feel, because of, you know, Mars retrograde later in the year, is really kind of giving you that chance to, like, sift through all of this garbage and all of this stuff that has, you know, come up from, like, the depths of you. That's how Pluto retrograde works. It's not always external. Okay. It's not like, oh, that person did this and they're shit. And, you know, like, if this was different in my external life, then everything would be easier. It's like, it's about actually, like, what is coming up from within you and being revealed to be cleared. That's
Pluto then becomes that light that
Yep.
shines on it, and the sifting is perfect because I just think of now I'm baking. So we're sifting through the garbage and what is left to discover. And that's where Jupiter plays a big part. He is like revealing the big things. He is helping you to reveal the big things. And if you're aware and awake and doing that work, I mean, this is a time of, like, gold mining, like literal gold mining. So instead of Pluto moving forward, which has been not chaotic, but when the outer planets move forward, things are literally moving forward. Like, oh, I am a steamroller, I am not stopping. Like, that's exactly what happens. I am not stopping. So you want these planets to retrograde. And that's what's funny about some of these, like, things that Katie was talking about, some of the astro memes or you know, or online astrologers, where they're making it this, like, you know, and yes, I will still be very honest. And for me, I am Plutonian, so I don't have and I've got Pluto retrograde in my chart, so I don't have a problem with going backwards, but
Yeah.
it's not like unicorns. We're like talking Hades shit here. Like we are
Yeah.
talking underworld shit, which some of us love and are acquired to, and accustomed to. Others are scared of, and that's cool. Like it depends on your own chart, but
Yeah.
you want that steamroller to slow down, and that's exactly what we get when the outer planets they slow down and they just move back this much. But there has to be this awareness and this subtlety of energy that you're working with. It's not just going to be like, oh, you know, you've got a speeding ticket in Venus retrograde. Oh, your computer shit itself in Mercury retrograde. Oh, you run up someone's ass in Mercury retrograde because you're not paying attention. You know, that sort of stuff, right? Like, it's not going to be as prevalent as that. And I think that that's where outer planets being retrograde takes us into a deeper nook of our own lives if we're willing to go there and explore that.
Absolutely. You know, and as being someone that doesn't have natal transpersonal retrogrades, like that steamroller.
How is that for you?
Yeah, because that's hard for me, because I'm a pusher, you know, even though I'm like super introverted and you know, only people that know me intimately see that real pushiness with me. I mean, I have Mars in the 10th house as well. It's the top rising planet in my chart. So like, and it's in Sagittarius. So, you know, I live my life like this kind of fucking out of control freight train, and
trying your moon,
trying my
an emotional train wreck. No.
Trying my Jupiter as well, right? It's just like so much fire and intensity. And these periods really work on me in a way that like I don't always want to have to, but I know it's imperative to actually give me that energy and momentum when things move forward again, because I'm able to ride that train because I know the energy. It's easy for me. Where other people, when everything's in direct motion, in those kind of 6 to 8 week periods, again, like Tiarnie said, usually at the beginning of the year, things move so quickly that people with more natal retrograde placements find it really overwhelming. It's too much to juggle, and it's the new year and I've got to do this and this. And then for me, it's just like flow. Like maybe the train's completely out of control, but I'm able to kind of navigate it somehow. So yeah, for me, like everything in retrograde it's a bit shit, but you know, I'll manage. I will manage.
And that's what we're all being urged to look at and understand though, and work with, right? Like, you know, I think that I think it's so cool how, because are you predominantly water and fire?
Yes.
And I'm predominantly earth and air.
Okay. Oh,
and then and then you've got Mercury, and only Mercury and Chiron retrograde, and I've got the 5 outer planets retrograde. And I exactly. So we've got this real balance, and I am all about, like, I'm a slow and steady wins the race sort of person. Like, I'm not a pusher. I'm not a forcer. I'm not yang in that, whether you're introvert or extrovert, like, and I definitely am not an extrovert, but I'm not a yang sort of person. And I think that taking a step back, like any clients who come to see me, they're not going to get this forced, like, I'm gonna just like you, and you wouldn't be like that either, but I just mean, like, it's
a
just
little
this
more subtle, but I can
but you know, and I mean, I think that I've also got my moon in Cancer in the 10th, so there's still this sort of, you know, like, I like to hold that space for people in that sort of nurturing way. You know, what we're watering, you know, grows, and because I'm so Taurian and Venusian, it's all about, what are you watering, what are you taking care of? And if you're always forcing and pushing, you're not really nourishing what needs to be nourished. And yes, it's going to work for people who don't have planets natally retrograde, because that's what they're used to. But then also what they get and gift from me is the permission to go, that so much ease can happen when you slow down, and so much more can be achieved when there's some sort of stillness and there's some sort of contemplation. And then what I get from the other side of things is that, stop being a lazy mole and do some shit, right? Because I've got Mars in Taurus, so, you know, like, couldn't be more lazy. But it's this is how it works. It works like this. There's this real beautiful duality, and we understand it. So instead of, like, there should be no fear. Like, to me, always, I don't know if you teach that too, but if you're scared when you read something about astrology, that's not astrology. Exactly. Like, and that's how I feel about it. Absolutely. You know, and something, I don't know if I shared this the last our last cosmic conversation, because obviously we've got this new channel now, so remember to subscribe, like and share, people, because this is our new thing, right? Like this is our new
Please
thing.
connect with us and comment, and we want to keep going deep with you beyond just this space as well.
Exactly, we really do. But what I really love about the Leo King is he said something that is like, you have to be emotionally mature to understand astrology. You have to take yourself out. And I probably did say that last time, because you have to be objective when it comes to astrology. So there's nothing to fear around retrogrades, forward moving planets, Pluto, friggin' retrograde, like nothing at all. Like, it's just awareness. Awareness becomes a superpower. That being forewarned is being forearmed, constantly knowing what's coming up. You can't change that you've got to go around the corner and there's a lightning bolt, but guess what? You're aware that it's there, so you're able to navigate it better. And that's what I love about retrogrades, is you're getting all the clues in the lead up if you just pay attention. But when you're wearing the badge of busy and having to do so much and trying to compete with the world and blah 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 blah, all the stuff that I'm certainly not interested in, you're missing all of the clues, and you get caught up then in this sort of tsunami, or in that sort of whitewash, where you watch people constantly keep getting pushed over when they're in the beach, like people who don't know how to swim, and they just keep like going down over and over. That's the whitewash of a retrograde if you haven't paid attention.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about like learning how to flow with these cosmic cycles that we are given. Like in life, there is times to push, and in life there is times to receive. So
exactly,
obviously we can't, if the transpersonal placements are retrograde for half the year, of course we can't all just like stop and do nothing. It's not then, it's because that's how people get confused. They take it to the extreme. It's like you said, if you spent like every Mercury retrograde just sitting inside, like you're missing experiences. Like sometimes we have to buy shit even though it's a retrograde. We have to move house. Like I think I've moved house almost every Mercury retrograde for the last like 3 years. And it's a bit
of
shit.
course you have.
Of course, like I said, natal Mercury retrograde, right? So I know
in
how
the 12th too. Like I've met a few people with natal Mercury retrograde in the 12th. Like, ouch.
Yeah, it's and it's so close to my ascendant as well. I think it's 6 degrees from my ascendant. So it's conjunct the ascendant on the 12th house side, but it's still super prominent in my chart. But yeah, like the gift though, I will say, of moving in Mercury retrogrades is that, being such a mutable kind of gal that I am, it's a very nice way of putting it.
We love mutable, Joe Exotic.
Yeah, Tiarnie loves people that are mutable dominant. It's her favorite kind of people. #trigger. So, for me, having this retrograde period of like Mercury and moving house, it gives me the flexibility to actually like cut contracts and move and stuff before that time is given, because I'm restless, often like the space is right, but it's just not right. Maybe I'm more like Goldilocks with that. But
none of the beds suffice.
Right, definitely Princess in the Pea. If anyone is Princess in the Pea in bed all the time, I'm your gal.
Oh my God, that's so good.
But yeah, like I actually don't regret all these moves during a Mercury retrograde, because being who I am as an individual, it kind of gives me that out that I kind of need in life. Like if something is too locked in, this kind of rebellious part of me just like wants to always kind of fight against that. But moving in a Mercury retrograde, which people would say not to do, right? Because usually something will appear further down the track that kind of makes you like it's not really the right circumstance. But so for me, that's great, because it just kind of lets me have that out, like I'm able to break it. Like it doesn't give it automatically, but like an example could be, I move into a place and, it's whatever, there's horrible neighbors or something like that. So even though I'm locked into a contract, somehow by this magic and synchronicity that is my life, somehow I managed to find a way to break it without actually, having to pay a lot of money or being trapped in there. And it's usually because there's some kind of like energetic flexibility that kind of comes in at the time that I've signed that contract, where like moving in a normal, like, forward motion Mercury transit, for someone like me, like, I could get really, like, locked into something and I can't get out of it. I don't know if that's making sense, but, like, it's a cycle that I've noticed when I look back on, of, like, me always moving in retrogrades. But what's interesting with the apartment I'm in now, this was the first move that I've had in all of that time that wasn't in a Mercury retrograde. And by God, I have tried to get the fuck out of this place so many times, even if it's just mentally. And I can't. Like, I'm just being so forced to be here and be here now, like your shirt, literally. Like, and it's triggering the shit out of me, right? Like, I've actually gone to other house inspections. I've been, like, trying to plot and plan how I can break my lease, and the universe is just like, nah, babe, like, that's your home. Like, you got to stay.
Do we smell an air of fixed, having to come in, a bit of commitment?
Absolutely. And, I think my lease is up in, like, I don't know, a month or two, and I'm already just, like, wanting to leave. And, the way that the world is at the moment, like, I probably can't. And that's, like, a huge thing for me to face. I mean, Venus retrograde, like I said at the beginning of this, if you guys remember, it was in my 4th house. So, of course I'm being triggered by all of this, like, having to be
restless,
present, but being super fucking restless in my environment.
Yeah, 4th house, home.
Yeah, exactly, home. And then the North Node, which is about to move into Gemini, that is my 4th house as well. So I think it's actually already just moved into my 4th. I think that my 5th house starts at, like, 2 degrees Cancer or something like that. So
yeah.
I'm already feeling it. But yeah, like, I'm being really, like, the next 18 months for me is going to be really, where is my home? Like, where do I want to be? And bringing that power back to myself, using this retrograde to really actually think about what I want, instead of being totally natal Mercury retrograde about life and just thinking off the top of my head and just making the best of the situations that I blunder the fuck into, right? So it's like, it's wild out there, guys. So that's just, like, that's how I apply it to me. So, like, again, it's like, this is the magic of, like, finding where these transits are happening for you, and linking those dots together, because we don't read anything in astrology as a singular entity. So even if you're getting to learn about a placement that you have, like, I have Venus in Gemini, like, to get to know that, yes, you need to learn about what does that archetype in that sign mean, for sure. But your Venus in Gemini could be trine your moon, and it could be opposed your Mars. And that's going to be different to another individual who also has Venus in Gemini. So you have to learn to read the layers. Like, astrology is always about layering upon
layers.
So many layers.
Like a billion layers.
Literally a billion. Yeah, pretty much. I would say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, a billion layers.
But there's a formula to it. And I think, and I'm sure the way that you teach would be quite similar, but, like, it's really about teaching people of how to apply those layers. Like, because people freak out, right? They look at a chart and they go, what the fuck? Like, where do I start with this? And, one of the ways that I teach is, like, the planet is the person. The sign is how the planet presents itself, okay? So they're going to be, dressed as what we would imagine that sign to be. And the house that you have that planet in is, like, where the play or the drama or the story is taking place. What room of the house is it in? Is it, the kitchen? Is it Taurus, wanting to be in the kitchen and be homely? Is it, I don't know, I can't think of another good example, but Libra, right? More about connections and who are the people in the room, and what's going on with that. Like, that's how I kind of teach that basic layering. And I find it quite helpful. Even for me, I still use that formula. Because it can be, I
think you have to.
Yeah, because it can be confusing sometimes. Like, there's so many different aspects that come into play that it's like, how can we really strip this back to the basics? And for me, it's always, like, just kind of dressing up the planet as a person in a house. That's definitely how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got on that tangent, but I feel
it's a great tangent.
Good.
It's a great tangent. It's always good to tangent.
Always. But
yes.
I think just to kind of wrap up this one today,
Mm.
with the retrogrades, 2020 is definitely a, it is a period, a very extended period of this reflection that we've been speaking of. And like Tiarnie said, this is kind of the last year that we're having this double up of both Venus and Mars retrograde in the same year, because usually they are 1 year at a time. So I love though that it's happening, because we didn't actually say, but Mars is retrograde in Aries, which
Mm.
is the sign of its rulership. So
Mm.
I actually, if we think back to 2018, that was tough, right? Because we had Mars retrograde in Aquarius conjunct the South Node, and that
Mm.
really messed up a lot of things, because especially, I don't know, different in Australia, but I know here, in the Northern Hemisphere, having all of the retrograde seasons at the moment happening during summer,
Mm.
it's really weird, because it's what do we think of summer? We want to be outside and enjoying life and festivals and fun and being with friends, but the planetary cycles of the last 3 years in that time period over here has been calling upon us to do the exact opposite, right? Because especially those of us that are quite aware and awake and have been doing the work, we know that we've been getting worked on. And in order to get worked on, we need to really remove ourselves from that outside world more regularly than perhaps we normally would. So it's been a very strange few years of everything's really sunny and beautiful out there, but internally it's this very Hades kind of space, especially with the way, that the Pluto, we've been kind of preparing for these Pluto retrogrades in the sense of we knew that the Pluto-Saturn conjunction was coming. So even before Pluto got to those degrees, I feel like the Pluto retrograde has had more dominance, because it's been building to this epic transit that we have finally stepped into. But I really feel like it's this kind of synthesis of masculine and feminine really coming into balance with the
Mm.
Venus and Mars happening, together like this. So
Mm. Absolutely. And not that they're going to be, that they'll be sextile for a little bit, but that they're both in yang energies. They're both in an air and a fire. We've got Aries at home in his fire sign, and Mars doesn't like to retrograde at the best of times, my friends, let alone in his home sign when he just wants to move forward and get on with shit. I mean, so to have him in Aries for 6 months, which, to be honest, again, I've actually also I think I can put a joyful spin on everything. It's just a part of who I am. I think, what have I been called? The joy witch, the witch of joy.
I
Yes,
love
I'm a witch of joy. But I mean, the one thing I do like about Mars spending an extended time in his home sign is he's in his home sign. Come on, that's good. That is awesome. And look, Mars retrograde in Aquarius, not great, but Mars in Aquarius is bloody good too. I mean, we do, Mars, Mars is about to move into Pisces in May the 13th, the same day that Venus goes retrograde, actually. So Mars shifts sign, then Venus retrograde. So again, there's this polarity, which I think is quite interesting. But I think that Mars in Aries is giving some sort of dynamic force. We will be able to get things done. We will be able to sort of traverse through the waters of what's being presented with us in 2020. Mars is giving us the energy, and goddamn, we all need that, right? We need Mars being at home, holding the sword, holding the flame, Athena. This is what we're doing moving forward, pioneering. But when he retrogrades, my friends, especially people in my generation, all the Pluto Libra people, I mean, fuck, I am watching with a very watchful eye at what's going to transpire there on a collective, because people might turn there's an energy of dangerousness, and I don't want to say that out of fear, because it's never out of fear, it's just awareness. But there, to me, is a dangerousness. Mars opposing Pluto, it doesn't have to be dangerous. It can be actually full of energy and full of vibrancy, actually, and getting a lot of shit done. It really can be. I mean, Mars Pluto, but still, at the end of the day, they're still malefics, and them having an opposition, it's what are you going to come up against in that time? But I know that we will really dive deep into that that well, closer to as well. But again, like that's a retrograde, you know, and a strong signature of 2020, along with Venus in Gemini, you know, this you know, Aries Gemini energy working well together.
Yeah.
But it's just this interesting formula, I would say. It's just an interesting formula, and it's something to be very aware of. Like these two retrogrades in this year, you know, I think that they're very big key players to what's going to transpire forever on, because a lot of people's relationships are being under the spotlight big time at the
Yep.
moment. There's a
Yep.
lot of marriage breakdowns, there's a lot of relationship breakups, you know, all those things are already happening. So get Venus and Mars involved when they retrograde. I mean, there's going to be a lot of deeper work that needs to be either done. There's going to be a lot of walking away from relationships. Like it's all there. And this year for me, I felt deeply into it being very relationship oriented as well.
For sure. And I like what you said about that too, because it gets me thinking about like how, you know, the Saturn Pluto conjunction happening in Capricorn, you know, the last time that these two were in conjunction was in the early 80s in Libra. So
Exactly.
this is ending, like 2020 is like a big shift point of like the last kind of relationship cycle that we've been moving through.
Exactly.
So that's how I think it's really interesting that Venus and Mars are then meeting together in the same year as well, to kind of really push, but in a retrograde way. You know, it's not like an active pushing, but it's like an internalized realization, I think, of like, are these dynamics really working for me or not? And, you know, like I always look at like the early 80s generation, or even like late 70s, but those that like have a lot, you know, it's quite common to have the Libra stellium at that time. You know, it was kind of like the first generation of divorce being common. So that
Exactly. That was
generation,
my parents.
yeah. So, you know,
Mm.
that generation has a lot to unpack of
Mm.
kind of being on the forefront of children, you know, going through that experience, you know. I like being Pluto in Scorpio for me, like it was already like everyone's parents were kind of just weren't even together really when they were born and stuff like that, right? So
Yeah.
but you know, that's a big ending period that we're having of like, because those of that generation that have been doing the work on themselves to understand what they experienced as children and how that dynamic does not have to carry into their current relationships. This is why so many relationships are coming apart, because people are realizing how they've actually been playing out their traumas, Pluto trauma, and how so
Exactly.
many relationships, it's not to say that there isn't like love or connection there, but if we dig a bit deeper, Pluto, it's been trauma bonding, not soul bonding. And that is a big kind of, yeah, a big ending, I think that's going to happen this year, which is great.
Yeah.
Like, it's not
Yeah.
even an ending, it's like an awareness. It's just a new
It
level
is.
of
It's an
revelation.
awakening.
Awakening, absolutely. And
Yeah, it's a
evolution.
new relationship awakening, and it's you know, it's expansive in its demise, you know. Like I love that you've brought up that relationship thing, because really this Pluto Saturn conjunction was the end of that Saturn Pluto Libra stuff, right? Like that's really what it was. It was the end of that relationship cycle, how we relate to each other. You know, this new Capricorn movement, it's shown something, I don't know, a little bit more inner authority. Is that's just been the thing for me. Like that's the Capricorn stuff. It's like, where's your authority? Whereas Libra, it's like, oh, but what do you think? Oh, but what do you think? Where do you want to go for dinner?
Yeah,
Like what's,
yeah,
you know, like let's just be really peaceful and passive, which is like, don't get me wrong, I've got the stellium in Libra and a
yeah,
Libra ascendant, so I've got it, I get it. But
yeah,
the thing is that, you know, my inner authority has always been really strong, and I think that that's where the Capricorn stuff comes in. It's like, right, like it's time to strip away from these old ways, old relationship ways,
yeah.
and you can still be in a beautiful marriage, both being two separate individuals, and strong within that. And then Mars and Venus, it's like they're sending us these, you know, graceful gifts to go, well, hey, you know, let's really put you into your feminine, put you into your masculine, within the retrograde,
Yep.
put you at home, you know, you're in ISO, you're not going anywhere, you know, and I just know so many relationships are just like, oh, you know, like they're getting cranky with the husband every 5 seconds. And look, yeah, there's tense, there can be tense times. Absolutely. I'm not
Yep.
going to lie. There is tensities being at home 24/7 with everyone. But if the foundation's there, it's fleeting. It's like you can notice it, you can witness it. And then all of a sudden, if there's any old trauma or anything else come out, because this is fourth house stuff for me, all this Capricorn stuff is in my fourth house. It's just
Yep.
drudging out the fourth house stuff. Like, you know, and they talk about Pluto karmic. Well, if you've got a Libran ascendant, then you're going through what I'm going through. And that's what's really karmic. I think that,
Yep.
you know, if this Pluto retrograde and all this Capricorn stuff has been in your fourth house, that is deep shit that we are moving through. Like,
Yep.
we never go through this again. Pluto will never be, for some people, Pluto will never get to their fourth house. And I love pointing that out in my sessions. It's like, you know what? This transit you're having, I will never have in my life. Like,
Yep.
all you heavy Pisces people with Neptune just smashing people's moons and ascendants and suns, I will never have that. And to be honest, thank fuck. Like, that's a pretty full-on fucking transit to have, Neptune smashing out all your Pisces planets. Whereas
Welcome to my
in my
life.
whole life, yes, that's
Yep.
right. And that's what I mean. But when we understand that and understand the validity in what each individual is going through,
Yep.
then we understand, you know, for that karmic post around Pluto, yeah, if it's in your fourth house, like, or maybe your eighth and your 12th, you can really, that's really deep. But other than that, it's not going to be like that for you. And so personalizing things takes it to this whole different level. And it's the same with this Mars Venus retrogrades, again, knowing what it's doing in your chart. And, you know, especially for these Chiron Geminis, like Venus is going to go over their Chiron a few times. And I've done quite a lot of sessions around that with people. And it's like, this is interesting because you've got a lot of deep, beautiful healing to do around your own worth and around your own wounds. So that's sort of, I think it's more like 83, baby, 83, 84. I think
No,
Chiron Gem.
Chiron Taurus. So
Oh, is it?
yeah, it's like probably more like 85, 86.
85.
Up
Yeah,
until,
no, you're good with the years. I'm not as good.
yeah, it's okay. We both have gifts. But no, yes, like my Chiron's 23 Gemini. So
Yes, okay, so that's what, yeah, because mine's 18 Taurus, but then my husband, who was born in 82, it was retrograded 18 Taurus at that point. So yeah, I just wasn't sure when it came out and where it was at. So I was thinking more 80, 83, 84,
yeah.
but no, it's 85, 86. Yeah. So that like, that's an interesting, like, that's a different interesting dynamic. Like I Venus, I don't have anything in, I've got my Mercury in Venus,
Yep.
my Mercury in Gemini. So Venus has already hit that though at 1 degree. So she's not going over that. But these Venus Geminis, now I'm struggling.
Right.
These Chiron Geminis, especially between 5 and 21 degrees, which is where she is retrograding.
Yep.
That's the 3 hit. That's where you're getting the 3 hit. So there's a lot of deep healing for those people. So it's just all so juicy and delicious and fascinating.
So
and
much.
you know,
There's so much.
it's a big year. It's a big year of retrogrades and reflection. So yeah, I really hope that this has helped some people and to understand about retrogrades a little bit more, because obviously we love talking about it.
Always. And yeah,
Always.
I was thinking that this morning, you know, that it is kind of like a part of astrology that's not always really discussed in like how it unfolds, you know, like between the transpersonal and the personal. So yeah, good job. I'm feeling it.
Feeling good.
I think we should wrap it up at that, because we talk a lot and we don't want this to be like too long. I think our last one was like 90 minutes, so we'll try to keep it a little bit less. But thank you, love, as always, for joining me for these conversations. I love them so much, especially because we're able to now not just keep these conversations for ourselves, you know, we're able to kind of hold space for you guys to explore these parts of your own charts yourself. So as we said earlier, like, you know, please feel free to share in the comments any questions that you have, you know, about your own chart, how to find these things. You know, we're both happy to help guide you through this process. And
any topics that you might want us to discuss, like chuck that stuff in.
Absolutely. Yep. Because we have no fear of going to the
anywhere
places within astrology, both being like quite Plutonian women. You know, I think maybe a Moon Pluto talk could definitely be on the card.
Oh yeah, we have to do that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just I want to say before we wrap up, and not go on another
On
tangent, but
another
just really,
tangent. Yes.
no, just really quickly, I have to say that we won't get into our composite chart tonight for this one, but we will at some point. But also after we did our last conversation, because me and Katie talk like this all the time, like even before and after we do record this, we're still going like for a long time and having these exact same conversations. But when I got off the last call, which we were on like the phone for like 3 hours or something, and I got off and then we messaged for another like 40 minutes. But I just wanted to, it's very hard to meet someone who can have these conversations and who can meet you there and I know I don't want to say obsession because it sounds like a bad thing, because it's so not. Like, it's not like an obsession, but then it's just our whole entire lives. So when I can talk, it's everything. Like, it's just absolutely everything. Like, every single conversation that we have, astrology comes into it. Like, it's just there's no way out of it. Like, I just don't see any way. Like, how can you not want to talk about the astrology of the Tiger King? Like, that's what I did. I went and Googled, and of course she'd already brought up all the charts and said all their Marses were in Leo, and I'm like, shit, I didn't even see the proper chart. I just went to the ephemeris. Like, I couldn't even find his birth date, right? So the thing is that's where we go straight away, and that's what is so juicy and delicious and different about this. This for us is literally us bringing who we are all the time to the table. It's not just a fascination. We're not just dibbly dabbling. Like, we literally do want to look at the Tiger King's chart. Like, that's the first thing. Like, even when I was watching Making a Murderer, I was just like, I don't know if you've watched that, but it's incredible, because I'm just like, and I'm like, that guy has just got, it's fully 12th house. It has to completely constantly being convicted of things, constantly in jail, out of jail. You're being 12th house stuff is going on there. But it's just, that's the first thing that I just want to go, I want to look at that person's chart. I want to see that chart. I want to see, because you want to study people. And I think that it's the study and fascination with people that gets you loving astrology, and the fact that, yes, there's a billion layers and it just never ends, but the commitment, that's where people can peter off. And I get that, because not everyone's built for it. Like, astrologically, not everyone's, even in your own chart, you're either built for astrology or you're sort of not. And when you are, like, you can just keep going there. So I don't know, I just had to say that, because in front of all of our audience, because it actually really means the world to me. And we did share that last time we recorded, that to be able to have someone meet you exactly like where you are, constantly on that astrology front. I mean, it's very, very rare. I mean, I can talk astrology with a lot of people, but no one like Katie.
Yeah, no, and I love that dynamic about us, and I love that you shared that. I feel like you've been so on fire today, girl. Like, you've just hit so many amazing points. Like, I've just actually enjoyed sitting back a little bit more in this conversation today and just listening to you, because you've just been in this like beautiful channel, and it's been actually just such an honor to like share this space with you today, because I'm like, damn, girl, like, you're calling me out of my shit, but it's good. I'll handle it. I'll move through it. But no, it's been beautiful, and it's always such like a beautiful way to connect with you. So
it's a beautiful exchange. I love it.
Absolutely. And I think we saw some things in the composite that we were just like, of course, I've forgotten them now, but I think, was it Jupiter rising or Uranus rising? Uranus rising.
Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah, Uranus rules astrology. So
exactly. Yeah, there were some cool things.
So maybe one day we can unpack that chart for you guys as well.
I think we will.
All right. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us for episode 2. We will be back probably in a week or 2 with episode 3. I feel like we're probably going to explore the nodes with that. We do have the nodes changing in about that time period, actually, within like the next 10 days or so. The 5th and 6th of May, we'll have that.
Yeah, 4th and 5th. I think it might be 4th up you guys and 5th here.
But, yeah, like I said, don't quote me on dates today. I'm
usually don't quote me either.
But we'll figure it out, and we'll have that to you around that time, so that you can actually have a kind of like a formula or a template of how this is going to unfold, because it's a big 18-month cycle that we're about to step into again. So I'm excited for that. Thank you.
So excited.
And we will see you guys again soon. Okay. Bye.
So much love.